Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the CILIP Scotland podcast, bringing our members all of the best news, advice and events relating to the library and information sector in Scotland. I'm Sean McNamara, Head of CILIP Scotland, and I'll now pass over to my colleague Kirsten before introducing the topic of discussion this week.
Hello everyone, happy second episode. So I'm Kirsten McQuarrie, I'm Membership Officer for CILIP Scotland, and I'm also moderator of the Green Libraries Network, which we'll be hearing much more about shortly, won't we, Leah?
I'm very happy to report that we will, Kirsten. We've lots of incredible work to highlight in this episode. I'll have my work set out for me trying to squeeze it all in the editing suite. So hello everyone, my name is Leah Higgins and I'm the graduate trainee for CILIP Scotland, and I'm thrilled to be here for the second episode of the CILIPS podcast. I'm now going to pass back along to you, Sean, if you would like to introduce the theme for the episode to our wonderful audience.
Thank you, Leah. The theme of today's episode is sector advocacy, as the sector has been flourishing and leading the way with so many inspiring approaches to knowledge sharing, peer support and continued professional development. We are very excited today to share with you some of the newest and greenest outputs of the CILIP Scotland research into green libraries and ethical values in the profession, with the common thread being advocacy for all the wonderful outputs that librarians and information professionals empower.
The Green Libraries Network was catalysed by the fact that the library is the original recycler and the most valuable repository of reliable information around climate change and justice. In the theme of reduce, reuse and recycle, we thought we'd recycle some of our content to bring you the highlights of #GreenLibrariesWeek, as well as some never-before-heard interview footage. But first, a little bit of context is needed, and who better to fill us in than CILIP's very own Green champion, Kirsten. Scotland's Green Libraries Gathering was something that you created and clearly felt very passionate about, Kirsten. Why do you think that libraries are so well suited to supporting and advocating for climate change?
It's a great question, Leah, and I really believe, along with the rest of the CILIPS team, of course, that there is a unique link between libraries and sustainability. When we look at the sector as a whole, what we see is that we're not just leading the way when it comes to greening our buildings and operations, although we saw some brilliant examples of just that during both the Green Libraries Gathering and Green Libraries Week, more shortly, but also what our research partners at the University of Strathclyde call education for sustainable development, empowering library users to increase their own ecological literacy and using our amazing reach as often the only free-to-access non-commercial space left in a community to inspire what we sometimes call climate justice. As our podcast listeners know, libraries have a sustainable ethos at their core. I think you put it best, Leah, in the introduction. We were the inaugural recyclers, and that's why as the world wakes up to the urgency of climate action, libraries are yet again leading the way.
Thank you so much for giving that context about the work. So could you tell us a little bit about the day and introduce the audio that we're about to hear?
Absolutely, and what an amazing day it was, showcasing the sheer variety of eco-activities taking place across the sector in Scotland and beyond, because we were really inspired to be joined by a US contingent. It was really Green Libraries Global. They were following along. I think it would have been an early start for some people, but people will be able to check out the recording of the full event wherever you are in the world. But back to Scotland, an early highlight for me in the event was the National Library of Scotland and their work supported by our CILIPS Research Fund, developing a carbon literacy for libraries toolkit. So this was a very interactive session, which was just what we all needed to wake us up in the morning, and people can still respond to the Padlet. National Library are really interested to hear your thoughts and your ideas about what that library carbon literacy toolkit should include. So we will pop the link in the description box and somewhere on the website, and please do share your thoughts. So we'll hear a clip from the National Library session.
Part of carbon literacy training is a push to take on individual and collective actions. So the collective action that we all committed to was to develop a library's version of the toolkit. Basically, I think I'm preaching to the converted here in terms of understanding the sustainability model that libraries represent, and that didn't come through in the training that we participated in, and we feel that's a real gap, and that we can really create something that's quite bespoke that helps colleagues across the sector, but also reflects all the brilliant work that's already happening in libraries. We intend to work together with some external stakeholders, and we will develop a version of the toolkit that reflects the great work happening in libraries, that provides advice and guidance for people across the whole sector to consider their own personal sustainability actions and the wider actions. Because linking back to our climate action plan that we've developed, one of the really strong themes within that is wider influence and making sure that we share our expertise and we learn from others as part of that process. So we have just had our first stakeholder meeting, and that went really well. And we're looking at the museum's toolkit as it exists, and we're identifying areas that we can update and make library focused.
We were also thrilled to hear from all 4 of our Green Libraries Scotland grant recipients, which were showcasing outstanding projects in both public and school libraries. So I won't say too much more about that because I know we'll be hearing from one of the recipients very shortly. But that is, again, just so exciting, so inspiring. Planting the seeds. There's one of many eco puns that we shared throughout the day for just what libraries can do to inspire their communities. We also welcomed the wonderful Glasgow Women's Library, who were also recipients of CILIPS research funding. We were also lucky enough to take some CILIPS members on a visit to their gorgeous green library garden during Green Libraries Week, and people were able to head to CILIPS Instagram to watch the reel from that. We all had a wonderful time. Yet another wonderful Green Libraries gathering session was when we welcomed Scottish Book Trust and Catherine Wilson-Gary, planting the seeds of sustainable collections. Now, SBT have long been an inspiration to us here at CILIPS and the amazing online resources and recommended readings that they have gathered on this and countless other themes. So Catherine led us into a really expansive discussion into the meaning of sustainability, practical and thematic, and how libraries of all sectors can really learn a lot from how SBT have approached this. So check out this clip.
I guess the last thing I kind of wanted to think about a little bit, and I don't think I'm the expert on this, but I just wanted to think about this because the theme of sustainable collections made me think quite a bit. And I wanted to end on a bit of a big thought to encourage you to all go away and think about this. When we're thinking about a sustainable collection, I wanted to think, what is a sustainable collection? Because when we're looking at books and texts, we're looking at books and texts that are talking about sustainability, talking about the environment. And we know those books are going to potentially inspire both young people, both adults, people who read them, either with the knowledge they contain, with that kind of level of empathy. Hopefully, that messaging is going to inspire people to be more sustainable and educate them about things like climate change. But I also want to talk a little bit about how books are produced and the kind of emerging information that's coming out. So there's some links on here about wider sustainability in terms of publishing. From Tree to Me is from the Society of Authors. They've created 10 questions that they are suggesting that authors send to their publisher to ask of them to prove that they, as a publisher, are being environmentally friendly, advocating for the environment. Publishing Declares is asking publishers to pledge a commitment to the environment. So you can go and look at that and you can see who signed the pledge. I think libraries are already the hubs of sustainability in their community. They encourage a sharing approach to resources. Literally the basis is we all have these books, we all have these resources, we all have these texts. We as a community come together and we share them among us, and they don't belong to any of us, they belong to all of us. And that's sustainability defined for you, isn't it?
Another highlight for me was an eco-creative treat in the afternoon of the Green Libraries gathering, thanks to the Sustainable Writers Collective Paper Boats. Now, if you head to the CILIPS blog, you'll hear even more from Paper Boats because they have kindly designed a libraries toolkit for how you can get involved with their call to action. They are looking to create 1,000 paper boats from recycled library books, newspaper, you name it, any scrap piece of paper. They are going to take them all to the Scottish Parliament to really emphasise community demand for far more urgent climate action, and they're seeking what they're calling paper boat yards, so a kind of lifeboat stations for people to gather these paper boats together. So if that sounds like something your Green Library could get involved with, head to the CILIPS blog to learn more.
So now we'll be moving away slightly from all of our Green Library goodness, but fear not, because Green Libraries are never too far away in this podcast. The team would love to share with you some other advocacy work that has been happening. It's become essential as part of the support and funding we provide to projects to hear from the people who are really making a difference. So we got our tiny mic and regular size camera and spoke to the driving forces behind 2 recent projects.
The first is the Reveal Project. This stands for Reinforcing Ethics and Values for Effective Advocacy for Libraries. This fantastic project was led by Dr David McMenemy. David's a senior lecturer in information studies at the University of Glasgow. The result of the project was a toolkit and open access resource that's hosted on the CILIPS website. It empowers library and information professionals to take an approach which centres ethical values, political philosophies, and provides examples to preempt challenges, engage with different audiences, and learn to communicate the worth of the work that you do.
Completely. So oftentimes we talk about facing the challenge of preaching to the converted within libraries. To take us three as an example, we are very much already believers in the irreplaceable power of libraries across Scotland and around the world. So how do we make a concerted effort to move beyond that? And what could be the advocacy impact if and when we do? So personally speaking, as a professional whose academic background wasn't library specific, having done my master's pre-chartership in history of art, the Reveal project offered me an invaluable grounding in the theoretical foundations of our work and crucially how to apply that knowledge now in our everyday activities. Whether we realise it or not, or even whether we like it or not, we and all the CILIPS members listening are advocating for libraries each and every day. And yet we often discern what works, or rather what doesn't, in an intuitive, kind of ad hoc way. So Reveal invites us to ask much more deeply, how do we make the most convincing case for libraries? How does that differ, depending on our audience? And how can we as a profession grow our knowledge in ways that enrich the advocacy that we increasingly have to do?
These questions and more are all tackled within this toolkit, and we're extremely excited to bring the sector a resource that so comprehensively deals with the bigger challenges that we are facing within the profession. With this in mind, we asked Dr McMenemy what his motivations were for creating a toolkit with such a specific focus in mind. Hear him talk through the process of conceptualising and shaping the resource and what he hopes the impact will be. We asked David what inspired the idea for this project.
I've been writing about ethics and values in librarianship for quite a long time. And I realised one of the issues around ethics and values was it was one of the core aspects of the argument for libraries, but I didn't really see it being used a lot in terms of our advocacy. So for me, it was about trying to empower the library community to engage with those ideas more meaningfully, to allow them to be part of their advocacy more fully. So that was ultimately the main catalyst. And I also realised that a lot of people in the profession don't have access to that material. So if you go to library school, you might study it, but even then, not everyone does. So really, it was about trying to make as much of that material available to people as freely as possible. So that's the benefit of having it on a Creative Commons license. It means everyone can use it and hopefully benefit from that being available free.
Another question for David was, how important is it for us to focus on the ethics of librarianship when dealing with challenging issues?
I think it's massively important. A lot of what we do really does is a bulwark for human rights in many areas. So obviously things like freedom of expression, freedom of access to information, these are fundamental human rights, but they come with challenges because obviously there's content out there to offend anybody, and we need to acknowledge that, be honest about it, and realise that it means actually having to make arguments for material sometimes, as well as perhaps restricting in some cases if we feel the material isn't appropriate for the audience. But you need to be able to do that in an ethical way. So just kind of closing arguments down when people object. I mean, there are many occasions when people might have a censorship challenge and object to library materials on a reasonable basis. For instance, a book might have been bought for children that's inappropriate for that age group. You have to be honest about those clashes sometimes. So ultimately, the understanding of ethical values is crucial to be able to have these arguments in a meaningful way. I think one of the reasons I wanted to do the project was often you see advocacy that's done in a very lightweight way and it looks unserious. And I think these are very serious issues. And they always have been, but obviously with the arrival of the so-called culture wars, it becomes newsworthy. So a library, being accused of banning a book becomes a news story in the newspapers. So we need to be able to stand behind our decisions in a robust way. And that means a way that's based on our ethical framework, as well as ethical values that overarch that ethical framework as well.
We also asked David about the fact that he focuses in Reveal on what the meaning of advocacy is, and we asked him to tell us more about what it means in this context.
Again, one of the issues I've over the years that I've observed is advocacy being conflated a lot with marketing. So there's often people confuse the two things, and they're very, very different. They have similar background because obviously they're both about trying to make people aware of something, but advocacy is about persuading So it's not about, basically you must use this product because it's the best thing in the world. It's actually about convincing someone of an argument for something. So from a professional standpoint, advocacy is about convincing people in society about the value of libraries, not necessarily librarians, but libraries and the impact they have on society. And that's a very different exercise from telling someone about an event you're running or a new book that you have in stock that people might be interested in. It's a much bigger concept, as I said earlier, that is underpinned by human rights. So what we do actually, empowers people in society, empowers communities, and we need to kind of start to think about those arguments in that way, because they are important, fundamental things for society. But often we, I think, advocate in a way that's very lightweight and unserious. So for me, advocacy is about persuading. Certainly in libraries, it's about persuading people about the value of libraries and why they matter and what positive impact they have on wider society.
We also asked David how he would like to see library workers engaging with the toolkit.
Well, it'd be great to see people debating it. And that obviously, the tools that we've produced for this project are certainly my version of it. And it's absolutely fine if people disagree with it. If it starts even a debate about my approach to it, I would be delighted with that. But ultimately, it would be great if people who work in libraries and haven't had the chance to perhaps attend formal courses are able to understand CILIP's ethical framework better because they've read the materials. So they get that rather than just a set of, just an infographic or a set of 7 themes, what actually underlies those themes. And the guidance that CILIP provided in the framework is very good, but even beyond that, I think it's really important to read about what these things actually mean, how they've been arrived at over the years, what they mean across wider society, because one of the issues I think that librarians suffer from is just seeing their service in a silo, and a lot of these ethical frameworks that are applied over the top of services are universal, so they're applied across all services. So it's important to understand the arguments made for and against libraries using those ethical frames. So if it helps people understand that, then I'll be absolutely delighted, and it'll be certainly worth the effort. But ultimately, even if it's just about making people debate these issues more, whether it's on social media, at conferences, within journals, then again, I'd be delighted with that. Just open up a dialogue about these issues.
If you'd like to engage with the resources mentioned, then please visit the resources section of the CILIPS website or search www.cilips.org.uk/reveal. It has been wonderful to hear from Dr McMenemy, and we look forward to seeing how the sector engages with this important work.
Here at CILIPS, it's vital for us to both undertake and support work which contributes to the profession, especially when it adds value to the arguments we know to be true. We asked both School Librarian Donna Baird, who is the first school librarian in the UK to receive Green Libraries funding and is behind the Seeds to Success project at St Ninians High School, and our previous guest, Dr David McMenemy, about their advice in putting together a successful funding bid, no matter the pot of funding. Here's what they had to say about that.
I always have an idea for funding to get something from somewhere else. I always have a wee something in my back pocket just in case. At the end of the school year, sometimes there's extra money and you don't want to be at the end of the queue with an idea that's not fully formed. You want to be right at the front. So I would suggest always come up with an idea, and again, let it be someone else's decision. Definitely go for it. See what someone else comes back with you. Again, work with other people. If you're a lone worker, sometimes you feel that you have to do it on your own. Don't do that. There will be other people who will be there to help and support you, but make it practical. Make it something that you think that you can definitely do and see through all the way to the end.
I would certainly strongly encourage people within the profession to apply for research funding, like CILIPS Research Fund and also SLIC's research funds, because as much as it takes time to think about what you want to do with it, it can actually give you time and space to really think deeply about some of the things in practice that you might be concerned about. And I also think it's a responsibility collectively to contribute to the body of knowledge. I often think back to the scholar librarians of the past who really were librarians but also researchers and really thought deeply about what they did in terms of their practice. And that's a lost art, I think, within practice, and it'd be great to kind of get that back. And I think things like CILIPS Research Fund hopefully encourage that kind of reflection, and ensuring that it's put back into the profession, that it becomes part of the ecosystem. So I would encourage people to apply. If you've got an idea, apply, and really try to kind of make something out of it in terms of research and papers or outputs of some kind, but really feed back into the system that really is the one that we all live in.
We hope that this episode of the podcast has left you a few things on your to-do list. Mostly having a look at the Reveal Toolkit and perhaps dusting off that funding application you shelved for a while. We're really delighted to bring you this podcast and really hope that you enjoyed it. Have a look on the CILIPS website. We've got lots of events coming up. Have a look at the events page. Have a look at our blog for the latest news. And please do get in touch if there's anything you'd like us to cover.
And before we go, this morning we shared the call with our community for anyone and everyone who wanted a special shout out for them and their wonderful library team at the end of this episode. So Leah, who are we saying hello to for episode 2?
So today we're saying hello to Bruce Ryan, who contacted us from a bus stop somewhere. We hope that he caught that bus. We are also saying hello to the wonderful Donna Baird, who we heard from earlier in the episode. And also a shout out to James Adam on Instagram, who has become a recent follower of ours, and we hope will continue to catch up with content across social media platforms. Also, it's worth mentioning that if anyone has an idea for the podcast that they would like to share with the team, whether you would like to come for an interview or whether you have someone else that you would like us to interview, please do get in touch. If you go to the resources and the CILIPS podcast section of the CILIPS website, there's a Google form that you can fill in. We'd absolutely love to hear from you, as we want this platform to be as member-led as possible. So thank you so much for joining us for this second episode of the CILIPS Scotland podcast, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.